In this video, we're going to look at the digestive system, and we're going to look in particular at mammalian digestive systems. This is how mammals obtain the nutrients from the things that they eat. Because mammals are heterotrophs, they have to have ready-made organic molecules, therefore they have to digest them in various areas of their body, and this will include physical digestion as well as chemical digestion. Then they have to absorb the small molecules that they've now created and eliminate any solid waste that is no longer needed. So there are 5 steps to digestion in mammals. Step 1 is ingestion, that's eating. So we have to obviously capture our food or collect our food and take in large complex molecules like carbohydrates, proteins and lipids. And then we have to digest them. And this actually means breaking those big complex molecules into smaller, simpler ones that can be absorbed and carried around in our blood. There are 2 parts to digestion, and you can see in this diagram that we have physical or mechanical digestion, which is actually breaking the large food lumps into smaller lumps. And these lumps will now have a much larger surface area. And then there's chemical digestion, which is the enzymatic change of the molecule from a long, complex molecule into much smaller subunits that can then be absorbed. So the physical digestion or mechanical digestion, larger chunks manipulated into small pieces. This might be done with the teeth, for example. And then there's chemical digestion, which is the job of enzymes. And you've met enzymes before. These are molecules which have very specific shapes called active site, which the substrate fits into, a chemical reaction takes place, and the substrate is changed into the products. So there are different places in the human, this is a picture of the human digestive system, and there are similar structures in all mammals. In purple, you can see the physical digestion. So in the mouth, you would chew. In the stomach, it churns. There's a muscular bag that actually comprises the stomach, and it kind of squishes and mixes the food with the mucus and the enzymes in the stomach and the acid. Peristalsis actually takes place all the way along the digestive system, but it's particularly important in the small intestine. That's the tube squeezing and relaxing, which helps to push the food along the tube. And those are the main types of physical digestion. And in blue, we have the enzymes. So in the mouth, you have salivary amylase. Amylase breaks down starch. In the stomach, you have pepsin, which breaks down protein, as does trypsin in the small intestine. You also have another type of amylase called pancreatic amylase. No guesses for working out where that's released. And there's lipase and lots of other enzymes too. We are not able to digest cellulose, but if we were looking at a herbivore here, they would also have bacteria or protozoa living inside their gut that would do cellulose digestion in the cecum. And the cecum's down here. And then there are 2 places where absorption takes place. In the small intestine, second half of the small intestine, and also in the large intestine. And the absorption in the large intestine is predominantly water. So we've thought about ingesting, we've thought about digesting, and now we've digested everything, we need to absorb it into the blood or into the lymph system, which would then add to the blood. So absorption of small molecules, they're now small enough to dissolve. If they can dissolve, then they can move across the wall of the gut by diffusion. And if that is happening, we need to have a really large surface area. And what you will see in the small intestine is that the wall of the small intestine has folds on it. These folds have additional folds on top of them. You can see those. And they're called villi, and then on the villi all the cells have even more surface area. So there is a huge surface area inside our gut, in particular in the small intestine, where these villi and microvilli are, these folds. And anything that is water soluble will go from the gut contents into the blood, the capillaries there. You can see it's very rich in capillaries. And anything that is fat soluble will go into the green tube in the center there, which is called a lacteal. That's a blind-ended tube that empties into the lymph system, and then it will join the circulatory system later on. So a large surface area to absorb all of the breakdown products of digestion in your small intestine. So now we're on to the fourth step of digestion, and that is assimilation. So we've ingested it, we've digested it, we've absorbed it, and now we turn it into bits of us. So perhaps you build amino acids back into muscle protein, maybe you would build your own enzymes or hormones, or maybe you will store carbohydrate as glycogen in your liver, or make your own fats. I mean, that is how we build our body, by putting back together the molecules that we have absorbed. But there will be bits that we don't need at all, and that's the fifth step, egestion. Egestion is just the elimination of unwanted, undigested food, and this is usually, for us, indigestible cellulose, plus all the bacteria that are in our gut and any other water, and that's called feces. So let's have a closer look at comparing herbivores and carnivores. And you can see here, one of the first differences you'll notice is their teeth. A dingo is a carnivore, so very prominent canines here. They are for tearing meat, piercing through the flesh of the prey. A cow is a herbivore, doesn't have any canines at all, but it does have these molars for grinding. And humans are omnivores, so they have a dentition, which gives a clue that we've been eating both types of food for a long time. And if we look within us, we can see that there's difference in the composition of our digestive system too. So you'll notice things on this diagram like different sized stomachs. So a carnivore is eating a very rich diet, so they don't need a long digestive system. It's much easier to digest meat than it is to digest plant material. So very short digestive system, doesn't need to have a big stomach. Compared to the herbivore here, this particular herbivore, a cow, has multiple stomachs, and they store and digest the food with the bacteria that are living in there. So you can see that the small intestine and the large intestine are much, much longer. We want that very difficult to digest material to stay inside the digestive system for as long as possible to extract all the goodness out of it that we can, if we're a herbivore. And then humans are somewhere in between. So some features of herbivorous and some features of carnivorous animals. Just a little bit more here about the bacteria and protozoa that are found in the guts of herbivores. They can contain within them the enzyme cellulase, which digests cellulose. So they turn cellulose into glucose, which is a sugar, and therefore gives that animal lots of energy. And there are two kind of solutions to where these protozoa and bacteria can live. Some herbivores have them living in their stomach, and we call those foregut because it comes before all the intestines. Or they can have the bacteria and the protozoa living in the cecum, in which case we would refer to them as hindgut herbivores. So if you are an animal that chews the cud, or a ruminant, you would have multiple stomachs. Here they are. One of those stomachs is called the rumen, hence ruminant. And they actually regurgitate their food, keep chewing and chewing and chewing. It's really good. That keeps the pH of the stomach a little bit higher because those bacteria and protozoa don't really like acid. But it also keeps the surface area high, and then they keep swallowing it, and eventually it'll break down enough for absorption in the small intestine. If, however, you were something like a rabbit and you have a hindgut, you would have a very extended cecum. That's where the bacteria and the protozoa would live. And actually, A lot of the digestion is happening after the small intestine, which means you can't absorb it very well. So rabbits actually do coprophagy. That means they eat their own poo that comes out of their anus because it's got quite a lot of sugar still in it, and then they can absorb the goodness as it goes through the small intestine for a second time. So that's an interesting little thing that rabbits do, go around eating their own poop. In Australia, we also have marsupials, so you can have a look at these different types of marsupial. We've got wombats and koalas, which both have hindgut digestion, so they've got bacteria living after the small intestine, either in the cecum or the large intestine, and kangaroos have an extensive stomach, so they are foregut digesters. But all of these are trying to eat rather impalatable leaves or grass. The last mammal that we will consider is a bat. In particular, vampire bats. And vampire bats have a really odd digestive system because they have a liquid diet. So they need to have quite a large stomach, which is going to be able to distend, in other words, stretch, to take up the quantities of liquid that they take in. And a lot of absorption happens here, but it's absorption of water because they want to concentrate the blood. So it's got quite a solid, and then they'll pass the solids through in little lumps so that digestion can happen on that solid part, because you don't really want it just running through the digestive system without being able to absorb the nutrients. That's quite an interesting little extra there. So hopefully you'll be able to compare different types of diet and the digestive system and the teeth that are needed to cope with those, as well as being able to differentiate between physical and chemical digestion, absorption, and elimination of wastes.